But even when you look at the optics in this setup, President Trump was right. It did not look presidential. There's a certain threshold that you have to meet when you're looking presidential. Can you lead this country? Other candidates in the past have had it. I don't see that with Kamala Harris. Even Joe Biden, when they'd put him in, say, like a still photo environment, he would look presidential, may have disagreed with the way that he proceeded in his record. But Kamala looked as though she'd been called in by her teacher and the principal to say, Kamala, you have not been to class one day in 3.5 years. It's time to talk about your record. And on that record, she had no good answers. What we saw, though, there's a big, big difference between scripted teleprompter Kamala that we saw at the convention. That was only a week ago, by the way. And then actually being in an environment where you don't have notes, you have to actually answer on the fly with what you're being pressed on.
Right.
And the answers were so vague. I mean, my values haven't changed get 3 mentions, and say crime, for example, gets 0 mentions.
You know, we had a Democratic strategist on in our last hour, and she's someone who wants to vote for Kamala. And we asked her, did you hear any of the policies that you were hoping to hear? And she said, absolutely not. She said she was incredibly disappointed because Kamala, in those 16 minutes, didn't lay out one thing that she would do. She couldn't answer what she would do on day one. What did you make of that?
Yeah, well, it's really hard to say that you're going to turn the page and you're about the future when you've had the job for 3.5 years. And so you can't talk about what we're going to do in the future when you're the one who led to the nightmare that we're currently living in. Her first day was some 1,300 days ago. I mean, she is the one who could do it right now. She could go back to the White House today and put some of those things into action, but she hasn't, and she's not going to. But the thing that we're going to see coming out of this, because we're going into Labor Day, they did this intentionally, is that the media is going to say, check the box.
Right.
That's fine. You don't have to do anything else. And we're going to give you a wink, wink, nod, nod that you don't actually have to meet the typical threshold for being a presidential candidate because we're so triggered and want to go after President Trump.
And Donald Trump again, if you look at the contrast, last night, Donald Trump with Tulsi Gabbard on stage in a town hall setting. The setup was presidential. The lighting was good. You talked about the setup with Kamala Harris. She's sitting between, there's Trump and Tulsi Gabbard last night. Kamala is stuck, kind of wedged in the middle. Tim Walz's suit, nobody told him his collar was hanging out. And Dana Bash is at a very weird angle. It's poorly lit. CNN, I don't know who put this together, but that person is probably going to have a stern talking to this morning. Let's go through the questions. So the first question she was asked, if you're elected on day one, what do you do in the White House? If you asked Donald Trump, and Jason, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I'm sure he'd say, I'm going to close the border, right? He'd have a laundry list of items that he would address. It's such an easy question. That's what you do when you start an interview, platitudes, right? And then you get into the more interior questions. Kamala eventually landed on a child tax credit for new parents. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, this is a woman who supports abortion up to the day of birth. And that's her big day one task, is a child tax credit for new parents. What'd you make of that?
Well, there was no real policy. I mean, we talked about her. She did not rebuke Bidenomics. I mean, she very much still embraced Bidenomics and even had a pivot into the Green New Deal talking about that. I mean, none of these actual policies are going to help people. And again, she's talking about what we can do in the future. But when we talk about the $28,000 household effective inflation tax that has hit everybody, you look at African-American workers whose wages are down 6%. You look at the fact that we're adding $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days. Think about that. $1 trillion every 100 days. And Kamala Harris was the deciding vote for the two pieces of legislation that led to the inflation. There's going to be some accountability when we get to the debate. She might be able to pull a fast one with regard to, say, CNN. Not going to be able to pull a fast one on the American public.
And mics will be muted, by the way. It looks like that's final and official.
Everything's final. And just to give you the quick background on that, everything was locked in and finalized a week ago. And I thought, in my opinion, this was pretty sick for the Harris camp to do. They put out this whole fake debate about the rules, about the debate rules, on Monday because that was the 3rd anniversary of the horrific terrorist attacks there at Abbey Gate, where we lost 13 service members. And they didn't want the media covering the fact that Kamala Harris was the last person in the room and has some accountability for those service members being killed. And so, of course, the debate rules are set. They're the exact same as CNN. We'll be there on September 10th. Here's an interesting note, though. Kamala Harris and her campaign have not said 100% if she's going to be there now. They had previously said they were going to do it, but then there's whole dust up. I'm wondering if they look at the performance from last night and don't maybe have some second thoughts. We'll see.